Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Now with most hobbies out there, there's always a lot of specific terminology that people use or esoteric terms that apply to their particular hobby or even a job or a career. Well, board games are not any different. So for a while I've been wanting to do a kind of a terminology video, and so I wasn't really sure how to frame the whole video until tonight. Tonight I had a little bit of time and I went on to BoardGameGeek.com and just looked up a list of terminology. So I picked 20 out of hundreds of different terms. I just picked 20 at random. I have them on this sheet here. I have not really looked them over um, other than just really quickly typing out this sheet. And so I thought I'd do a video of 20 board game terminology, words, phrases, things that you would hear board gamers say when they talk about board games. And so I feel like this is going to be a pretty long video, so I'm just going to get right into it. And like I said, just kind of take this as I go because I'm not even really sure how I structured this one. Okay, so number one, we'll start with number one, and number one is abstract strategy. Now, abstract strategy games are typically two-player games. The abstract part of it means that there's really no theme. The theme is very generic. And the strategy part of it means that it's very strategic. So an example of this would be chess or checkers. Okay, two-player abstract strategy, because in chess, the theme isn't really there. You're just moving pieces on a board, but the strategy is there because you're thinking 3 moves ahead. What kind of strategy do I want to use? If he goes here, I have to go here. Stratego would be another abstract strategy game, so that's what that means. Number 2 is consumable. So when board gamers talk about a consumable board game, they're talking about a game that you basically consume, not literally, but you play through so many games and then the board game is done. You can no longer play it. You have consumed everything that it has to offer. These are usually applied, I think, well, actually not usually, specifically applied to legacy games where you play through 10 plays or 15 plays or whatever it may be, and you open up all the boxes and all the stickers and everything's been done, the story is done, you have consumed that game. So that's what they call a consumable board game, a game that you play X amount of times and then you're done. You can't play it anymore. Number three is light/heavy. So when gamers, this is one that I've actually had happen quite a few times, when gamers start talking about a game being very heavy or light, they're not talking about the actual weight of the game, the physical weight of it. They're talking about the complexity. So if I were to say that's a pretty heavy game, what I mean is that that's a pretty complex game with a lot of rules and a lot of different strategies. Or that's a pretty light game, meaning it's easy to learn, easy to teach, easy to play. Midweight game is usually called family games. So there's kind of something in between, like heavy games, which would be like, oh, this is a really complicated game. Light games would be something on the lines of like Uno. And then in the middle you have your, what we would kind of typically call family games, like Ticket to Ride. Let's see, what are we on? Number 4, analysis paralysis, or also known as AP, or AP prone. Analysis paralysis is an attribute that is somewhat negatively ascribed to a player who takes a very long time excuse me, to figure out what they do on their turn. And this is because they're analyzing every move that they can do. If they play a card, they could do this, but if they move this person here, then that would change that. But if I did that, then they could move there, which means I could do and it's just like, just take your turn. And so it's called AP prone, or analysis paralysis, basically a player who has a hard time because they're just sitting there thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking, trying to go through every possible move that they could make and how it would benefit them or how it would change the future of their gameplay. Number 5, trucking along, gateway game. Gateway games are usually family games, family weight games, like I was talking about earlier on number 3. Gateway games are usually games that are very easy for people to access. Just think of it, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Gateway games, like Gateway Drug or whatever. It's a game that's easy to learn, easy to teach, has a slight amount of strategy to it to keep you kind of playing and coming back to it. So family games are usually good for families, for teenagers, preteens. These are games that I would attribute Ticket to Ride, Carcassonne, King of Tokyo, maybe Tokaido. These are gateway games. Games that's like, you don't want to jump too far into a heavy game, but you're kind of sick of all the really super light games like the Unos or Old Maid or Chutes and Ladders or things like that. And so a family game is kind of in that middle area. Okay. Number 6 is Euro game. So this one's going to take me a while to explain. A Euro game comes from the term of Europe, right? Europe. So a European game. Although a caveat, nowadays there are many American companies that make Euro games. And I know that sounds confusing, so let me explain. A Euro game is a game that has a few attributes and elements to it that the others don't, which I'll talk about. I think it's on this list. So a Euro game has absolute strategy, meaning what you do, how you do in your game is all up to you, your strategy, what you've done. There is no randomness. Everything is what you pick, how you work your machine in your game, your mechanic game. There's also very little player interaction. So you're not fighting other players. You may fight over resources, which are finite. That's in what we would call indirect interaction, but there's really no direct interaction of playing with this player. I play a card on you, you play a card on me, or my turn is going to do something that really upsets your turn, or something like that. So Euro games are usually pretty heavy games. They're usually pretty long, typically. I'm not saying every single one, but they're very high on strategy, very low on luck, very low on player interaction. It's you kind of just play your own game, so to speak. You just play your own strategy, and Euro games are quite fun. Not what got me into the hobby, but there are some Euro games that I have, such as like Terraforming Mars would be a Euro game that I really enjoy, and they're called Euro games. Not necessarily that they were from Europe, but because they have certain attributes that I already talked about. I know there's more to this one. I just, on the fly, there's a little more to like Euro games. Oh, the theme is usually it's not super thematic. Euro games rely on very heavy mechanisms that they marriage a lot of mechanisms, drafting, tile placement, card management, resource management, whatever. Euro games also benefit greatly on game end scoring. There's usually no player elimination in Euro games. So yeah, there's a bunch of things for Euro games. So the next one is number 7, which brings me to the Ameritrash game, or what people call, if they don't like it, Ameritrash game. These are American games. American games are pretty much the opposite of what I just went through for Euro games. I originally got into Ameritrash games. Ameritrash games, or Ameritrash, they are high on theme. The theme is just beautifully done in the game. The artwork's usually good. If you have a company like Fantasy Flight Games that does awesome artwork, this is what got me into. I really like games that are very thematic. The mechanisms may not be super intense, and there may not be a whole lot of strategy to it. Also, the luck factor goes way up because you're going to have randomization of decks, like drawing from a deck of cards. Oh, that's what I drew. That's kind of random. In Euro games, not so much. Or rolling dice. I do something, so I roll the dice. I didn't roll what I need, so I don't do what I wanted to do. It's random. A lot of war games are like this too, because there's lots of interaction. There's direct conflict. I am fighting you for your stuff or for your things. So Euro games, Ameritrash games, it's kind of the two big dichotomy of board games out there. And they are kind of merging. They are kind of borrowing things from each other, and they're becoming a little bit more amalgamated in, is this a Euro game? Is this a Ameritrash game? You know, because the theme's there. But anyway, so those are the two big categories: Euro game and Ameritrash or Ameritrash game. Which one are we at? Number 8: direct conflict versus indirect conflict. Well, I've already talked about this a little bit because direct conflict is basically direct. I am coming for you for your stuff. Okay? I am going to enter your lands. I am going to steal money from you. I am going to do something that is directly at you or taken from you. Indirect conflict, which is usually in Euro games, is we've only got 5 sheep and there's 8 players, and so we all want sheep for our farm, but we're not fighting each other necessarily. I'm not stealing sheep from my neighbor. There's just 5 sheep in the market, and we're all trying to bid in the market to get the 5 sheep, and some of us aren't going to get sheep because there's not enough sheep for all the players to have. And so that's kind of like indirect conflict. You're not directly stealing from someone else, but you're kind of fighting over a finite amount of resources, whatever that may be, if it's sheep or cards or money or whatever it may be. It's not direct, it's indirect. So that's that one. On to number 9. This one's cooperative game, which I feel is pretty self-explanatory. There are a lot of cooperative games out there. In fact, the first game that I got into, which was a Ameritrash game called Arkham Horror, is a cooperative game. And it's basically the players are playing together to beat the game. So the game has a way, and they're all different, how they kind of work, but the game has a way of kind of fighting back and doing things. So we all get to take our turn, then the game gets to take its turn. And depending on what game you're playing, it takes its turn by you flipping over a card and moving this, or doing that, whatever. But a cooperative game is a not competitive game. We are not fighting against each other. We are working together to achieve some goal or scenario. And so cooperative games, I feel, are very underrated. They're an awesome tool, especially for gateway games, because people usually come into new games and they don't want to fail or they don't want to feel stupid. Well, hey, we can play a game like Pandemic or Horrified or Shadows over Camelot, Dead of Winter, and kind of play a sort of cooperative game where people don't have to feel like I'm not doing very good because I'm trying to be competitive, but this is a new game and I just don't understand it. So cooperative games are a good way to encourage a lot of interaction and a lot of fair play or co-play in cooperative games. So enough about that one. We're at number 10, so we're halfway done. I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible. 10 is filler game. Oh, it's a filler game. Oh, do we have a filler game? Filler games are just short, light games that you can play in between bigger games. So if you're waiting for other people to finish their game at a convention or at a game night, you would say, hey, does anyone have a filler game? This is a filler game, meaning it takes 15 minutes to play. So filler games could be, what would be a good example, like Exploding Kittens. It is kind of a filler game because it doesn't take too long to play. Love Letter, depending on the player count and which version you get, because the player count can go up pretty high, I believe, is another filler game because it's like, hey, we can sit down. It's not a big investment. It's usually, I mean, not usually, they're never hard to play, hard to understand. You draw a card, you play a card. Flux is another filler game. So filler games are just basically short, really light games that we can play really quickly while we wait for someone to show up, or we wait for Bob to come back with the pizza he went to go get, and we want to keep playing something. So number 10 is filler game. Number 11 is meta game. So meta prime in the writing world means self-referential, meaning if you're writing a horror movie, you have your characters say in your horror movie, hey man, if we were in a horror movie right now, this would happen. So you're watching people in a horror movie talk about being in a horror movie. That's meta prime. The meta game is the kind of games that you play outside of the actual game that you're playing. So the example that I looked up recently about metagaming is I would attack person A instead of person B on my turn, where attacking person A would probably be beneficial because they're winning or they have the most resources, but I'm going to attack person B because they stole money from me way early on, and so I want to get back. So we're playing kind of a game. Me and person B have this kind of meta game amongst this game between us. There's also meta games within certain games like Tapestry, where you're playing a little placement like a little Jenga game. That's just a meta game with yourself. So meta games are usually games that are played within the framework of the major game that you're playing, and they usually have to do with you and dependent upon who you're playing with. I'm going to go after Grandma because I think it'd be really hilarious if we teamed up against Grandma. Okay, well that's not the optimal strategy. That's just a meta game because you want to go after Grandma. That's that one. Okay. Number 12 is a dexterity game. Ugh. I do not typically care for dexterity games. There are a few of them out there that I give some nods to. I don't really want to play them. But dexterity games are your Jengas, your any game where you have to do some kind of dexterity element to not knock something over, to stack cards in a certain way. It's basically a dexterity game. The cat went by. Cat's playing its own dexterity game right now. That one's pretty self-explanatory. There's some kind of a dexterity element involved. Little hand movement or placing something or things like that. So yeah, Jenga is the one that people really know when it comes to dexterity games. But there are some other ones, such as like Crossfire, shooting, eye-hand coordination kind of things, being able to flip something up into a cup or something. Those are all like dexterity games. Okay, keep moving on. Oh, the cats run in circles during video time. Number 13 is min-max. Or mini-max. And what it is it comes from a guy named John Nash, who created the Nash equilibrium. If any of you movie buffs out there have ever seen Ron Howard's movie called A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe, that is who we are talking about. Russell Crowe plays John Nash in the film, and he comes up with the Nash equilibrium. So mini-max or min-max is basically the process of analyzing a particular turn with an emphasis on getting the best ratio of personal resources expended to realize gains. So it's basically, how can I take this to... It's usually at the end of a game, right? Like, I only have one turn left, or I only have 2 turns left. How can I min-max here? How can I minimize my losses and maximize my profits? Because I ain't got any more turns coming. And so I need to get squeak out those points to try to be competitive or whatever. And so that's what min-max means in the game world. I know it has a different connotation when it comes to like video games and role-playing games, as far as you minimize in certain traits and maximize in other traits, but I'm not sure if that's apt for the board game world. But min-max in board gaming means you're trying to minimize your losses while maximizing your profits, your gains, which is usually either money or victory points, whatever the end game objective may be. Number 14, some game theory terminologies. Zero sum. Someone might say it's a zero sum game. It means that the resources are finite, and I did talk about this in another video that I put out there about drafting. And so resources, cards, money, sheep, wood, workers, buildings, they're all finite. They're not infinite. So it basically means that someone has to take something from someone else. Poker is a good example. Texas Hold'em. People putting money into the pot. That's once the pot is in there, once people are added to the pot, that's all that they can win, and someone is going to win all of that pot. So what did I write down here? Property in games where all wins by one or more players are matched by losses of the other players. So I win 5, you lose 5. The wins and losses will always add up to 0. Poker is a good example. All money won by the players was lost by other players at the table. So most two-player games are trivially zero-sum, in that one player will win everything and the other player will not have. It always adds up to 0. So a zero-sum game. That was number 14. Number 15 is alpha player or quarterbacking. I was always under the influence, it was told to me as alpha player. People say quarterbacking a lot these days. It's a term I've never really used or become familiar with. I've always said alpha player. So anyways, it refers to cooperative games, like I was talking earlier. Cooperative games can suffer from having one person at the table, alpha gamer, or a person who's going to be quarterbacking, who really knows the game really well and is going to basically dictate what everyone does on their turn. Oh, this is because cooperative games are kind of like a puzzle sometimes. You need to go here to do this. If we do this, we can do that. And then so on your turn, you need to do this. And they kind of quarterback, or they're alpha gamer. And they're not letting people really discuss and figure out, like, okay, well, give me a chance to do something I want to do on my turn. But one person will just take control of the whole table and say, you got to do this on your turn. You do this so I can do this. So that way you can turn that card in. And then we can do this, and they're just kind of organizing everything, and nobody's really having any fun. So, quarterbacking is one I never really use. It's a term, I put it down because it's a term people use, but alpha gamer was always the one that I've always used, and I've always heard people use, I guess, until recently. So, we're almost done. 16 is theme. So I've talked about theme before. If someone says this is the theme, it means what the game is about. Or if something is very thematic, it means that what you're doing in the game matches the theme. So if I'm lighting a fire to a building, then that building burns down, which means I lose that building, maybe a little miniature or a card, and that gets discarded. That's thematic, because if you had a fire and your building burned down, your building wouldn't be there anymore. So it matches the theme. So, but anyways, going back, when someone says the theme, they're talking about what the game is about. What are you doing in the game? Are you merchants? Are you pirates? Are you entertainers? Are you magicians trying to come up with the best magic trick? That's the theme of the game. So that's what theme means. Number 17 is point salad. So a point salad game is a game where there's really no one way to get points. You know, you do this to cash in cards, to do this to get points. And then you do this to get money, to cash in cards, to get points. It's not like that. Point salad games are basically games where you can get points doing anything. You can collect a bunch of cards and discard them. You get points for doing that. You can move your guy all the way down to the end of the track on the board. You can get points for doing that. You can have a bunch of resources at some point. You can get points for doing that. So a point salad game is basically like you can get points doing a whole bunch of different things. There's really not one big objective as far as this is the only way that you can get points. And so that's a point salad game. And there's quite a few out there, and they're usually difficult for new players to grasp because new players are always going to be focused on just one objective of like, how do I get points? I collect cards to turn them in for points. Ergo, I just need to do anything to get me to collect cards. Well, in a point salad game, that's probably not going to be enough. You got to try to get points all these other places, everywhere else that the game allows you to. And so point salad games can be difficult for new players. They're usually not gateway games. Number 18. This comes from video gaming, I believe. It's called turtling. It's basically to play very defensively, and I'm pretty sure it comes from the video game world. But yeah, turtling means like I'm going to sit back, especially if you're playing kind of a military game or a Ameritrash game where you're kind of in direct conflict with someone. You're going to play very defensively. You're going to sit back like a turtle. That's what I call it, turtling. You're going to go in your shell and you're just going to protect yourself and hide and let everyone else kind of do nasty stuff while you just keep growing your infrastructure and your resources, and that's what it's called, turtling. I believe it comes from video game world, as far as I know. Down to the last two. 19 I already mentioned. So BGG, it stands for Board Game Geek. So BoardGameGeek.com is pretty much the number one site database for games. They have every game out there ever, from Korea to Germany to Italy. I just got a game recently from Italy that it's on there. You can look it up. People can post on forums. They can post pictures of their game, things like that. So it's a huge online game database. Oh. And so BGG basically means if someone's like, yo, I saw it on BGG the other day. It's a Board Game Geek. All right, down to the last one, which is good because I think the cats are ready to be done. And so number 20, and I didn't leave a good one for last. I should have probably looked at this list and organized it a little better. But 20 is balanced, which is basically mean is your game balanced? This is not balanced, or this is really well balanced. Meaning like this, if you have action selection games or games where you can pick certain roles and stuff, or factions, sometimes a certain faction with a certain ability or something, it's like that's not balanced because it's too overpowered, or OP, as another thing that comes from the board game or the video game world, OP. And so someone would say this is balanced. It's pretty well balanced. It's a pretty balanced game, meaning you can't just find one little break in the game, a little flaw, and be like, well, this is too overpowered. It's not balanced because if I do this strategy every single time, the game gives me strategies A, B, C, and D. Viticulture is one game where you can kind of have different strategies, but an unbalanced game means strategy C is the only way that you are going to win. You got to do strategy C. It gives you A and B, but strategy C is always going to work for you. That's a game that's like unbalanced. So if you say, yeah, it's a good balanced game, it means that if I go A or B or C, you could always win. And so those are the 20 ones that I picked kind of at random from BGG, and out of hundreds, there were hundreds of terminologies, things I didn't even cover, like certain mechanisms, and I didn't cover those because I probably want to do videos on them in the future, like deck building and area control or area influence and other terminologies like that. But here you go. Here's just 20 terminology or phrases from the board game world. Hopefully it was a short enough video. I tried to trek through it as fast as I could. and I will see you guys all in the next video. Bye.